state their concern, and it would become part of the record. It could also be anonymous with the concern recorded with no action to be taken, because if they're anonymous, you can address it. But you can know that it's going on. As the city manager and department heads look over the report at the end of the month, it could point them to issues within their departments that should be addressed with all employees. The board should receive the report monthly at first, but at least quarterly. This will give the board a tool to use in the city manager's evaluation to see that employees are not abused and citizens' concerns are resolved. There should be an evaluation process determined and communicated to the new city manager upon hiring one. My next proposal concerns a vision for our city. I am voicing my concern about the zoning change for the property on Highway 100. I do not object to changing it to commercial and will not be speaking about it at the public hearing, but I do object to the manner in which it is being done. I think everyone on the board at one time or another has objected to spot zoning, but you continue to do it. I would like to see a town hall type meeting or one more structured where citizens can discuss their vision for our city to prepare the way for you as a board to propose changes for our land use map. All zoning changes that do not comply with the land use map should stop until that is done. I would like to see us create a city where Fairview is a positive destination instead of the last resort because our property is cheaper than everywhere else. All of old Fairview is affordable housing for the most part, and we really don't need any more. I don't mean that to be insulting. We live in one of those houses ourselves. Let's not become Old Hickory Boulevard in Bellevue or Charlotte Pike in Nashville. Let's make 1/2 acre our minimum unless there is usable green space, not the fenced-in step system space, to make up the difference. How about a 55-plus community? We have limited expansion, so let's make it count. If we cannot support the infrastructure for new subdivisions, it will be better for us to be selective. I'm going to borrow a vision that Commissioner Bissell mentioned a few years ago, for the city to purchase the property in front of City Hall and make a park where we could have community events. It could become a destination for others to come to, somewhat like Leaper's Fork. Have small shops in the back, a bit like art galleries, hoppy shops, ice cream and sandwich shop. Let's expand the Chamber's Taste of the Town to include an art and craft exhibit from our local artisans and music from local groups. And I was going to give a shout out to Johnson Grass to be one of those groups, and I'm sure there are others here that would like to sing. It could be spread out to several restaurants, like a progressive dinner, with each one offering small plates of either salad, soup, or main meal, and end up at First District Coffee for dessert, sponsored by the other businesses that offer desserts. Maybe have the art exhibit at the Nature Center. All I'm saying is, let's believe in ourselves. Let's think special. If it doesn't happen in the next 5 years, that's okay. Let's make it be what we want it to be. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we go on to someone, you got something you want to say?
Well, I was just going to respond to something that
Okay.
Ms. Brooks had mentioned there, and you mentioned a lot, but I'm going to just talk about just the zoning or the land use map part of that, part of what you talked about. Thompson Station, I think, is experiencing somewhat of a similar situation on a smaller scale because they're not quite the size of Fairview at this point. However, recently they had an issue with their land use map, and I know they employed a consulting firm to come in and redo the land use map and involved a citizen focus group, consultant group, whatever you want to call it, to participate in that process. And I think they did that through the consulting firm. That's something I think we seriously need to look at soon, because we talk about the land use map and the issues with the land use map, and that the fact that it's antiquated based on our sewer situation and for a lot of other reasons. I think we definitely need to hear what the citizens' perspective is in terms of what they envision for Fairview 5, 10, 15 years down the road, and use that consulting firm to redo that land use map so that we have something that we can use to, and stay within the parameters of what it says in terms of zoning, because right now, we're all over the place. I agree with you. And that's something that needs to be handled early on, in my opinion, next budget year. We need to fix that, because we're at the point where there's a lot of projects coming through, and we are getting those situations now where certain parcels of property are wanting to be zoned that are really not consistent with the land use map, and you use the term spot zoning, and I suppose that's an appropriate term under our current circumstances, but I think that needs to be at the forefront of what we do going into next fiscal year, so that's something we definitely need to look at.
I appreciate that. I didn't mention a consulting firm because I thought we paid a whole lot of money for that the last time, and I was hoping that we might be able to handle it internally, but I know it's a big job.
Well, and maybe we can. I don't know what all that entails, and it's gonna take somebody that knows a whole lot more about it than I do, I can tell you that, to,
And probably to do it right, it would need to
Yeah.
be somebody that knew what they were doing.
right, so, good comments.
Thank you. Before we move forward, Mayor Carroll couldn't be here tonight. She had her husband Kevin, I know a lot of you know him, was getting his 25-year award with the Metro Sheriff's Department. Kudos goes out to Kevin for 25 years of public service. So that's the reason she couldn't be here. And Stuart had a previous engagement. So just to let you know while we're here, what's going on. Who'd like to be next?
Good evening, Vice Mayor Sutton, Board of Commissioners. My name's Don Dudich. I live at 7104 Donald Wilson Drive. Actually, I had a couple of questions, but some of the people aren't here tonight, so I'm just going to have to wing it with a few of them. So you're only going to get two from me tonight. And actually, Mr. DeSalvo is going to question you, but you're clearly sick, so I'll give you a pass this evening.
I'm here.
Okay. In January this year, an ordinance change to the powers of the Planning Commission was introduced. This change would have given sole control, of the design review manual to the Planning Commission. At that time, I spoke out against this measure, as it was unconscionable to give complete control of the city building standards to the appointed members of the Planning Commission. A Planning Commission that is filled with developers who have engaged in unethical conduct, developers who have requested concessions to the city's building standards as they relate to their building projects, developers who have left developments unfinished or completed with poor workmanship. In addition, these same Planning Commission members / developers continue to have a pattern of not paying their property taxes, even though they receive a monthly salary / stipend from the city. At the meeting in January, Commissioner Crutcher asked, and I quote, "Where is this coming from?" Speaking of this ordinance change, to which there was no response from any of the BOC members or the city employees. This is the only agenda item listed in the last 2 years that is not accompanied by a sponsor or a resolution. In February, during a town hall with the Planning Commission, I asked who had sponsored this measure. No clear answer was received. I did receive a few, I think, I'm not sure, and I think it was talked about at a workshop. Clearly, unfortunately, Mr. Cantrell is not here, but he's the one person who knows who brought that forward, because he drew the legalese up for this. So what I'm asking is, my question still remains unanswered. Who brought this ordinance change to the board for its vote? So I'm asking someone to get us that information. I think the citizens deserve to know where this came from and who was pushing this issue.
I'll get it for you.
Okay?
I'll get it for you.
Okay. And the reason I'm asking is, I mean, as Ms. Brooks just said, our zoning is just all over the map right now. To give it to these individuals that are kind of getting specialized privilege or services right now is kind of questionable, I think, and we deserve those answers. I really don't want to ask this next question, but I'm gonna. My next question involves the police department. And I'd like to preface my question by stating that this question does not concern the ongoing investigation, nor does it relate to any employment decisions on any employees. And unfortunately, this question is going to be directed to Mayor Carroll, but she's not here. But Mr. Commissioner Bissell, you also used the term, "the culture," speaking of when the mayor had said and referred to the police department as having a toxic culture. So I'm wondering if you can give us the definition of that, so that the citizens know exactly what's going on in the police department. But in addition to that, I'd also like to know what's been done to correct that culture that's in there.
Well, I can give you my definition of what I was speaking to. I'm not going to speak for Patty, and, she's not here. When I think of a culture, a work environment culture, I think of what is the accepted norm, where individuals working together will have a practice. It's not necessarily a policy or procedure, but just to have a way of interacting with each other that is not a positive way to interact with each other. And that's what I was referring to. I think that from what I know, there are things that within our police department where it's almost like you're either on this team or you're on this other team. And I don't think that ever works well in any organization. That the team that they should be on is the police department team as a subset of the city team. And that's what I was referring to, Don. Okay. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does, but and out of respect, I'm a 20-plus year law enforcement veteran, retired from the state of New Jersey, so I understand what can be done inside there. One of the things is a lot of individuals don't understand, and it's hard to understand, and Vice Mayor could probably help me out with this a little bit. The general public cannot understand what goes on inside of a law enforcement unit. There's a lot of things that the public, National Labor Relations Board, and we can go on the Office of Administrative Law, and even the courts would and have said, like, man, that's a hostile work environment. But it's actually a coping mechanism for those departments and for the individuals inside that department. So that's not really what I'm concerned about, and I think that's minor. And I think the board has to really look at that and say that that's also minor. It's not a major issue, but that's how officers deal with each other. And it really creates, while some may say that's not a good thing, it actually creates a harmonious environment for individuals to work in. Because when you may not get along and you may not, what I always call break bread with each other, but when the bell goes off or that call comes in, you do. And you come together and you get the job done and then you walk away. It doesn't mean we have to go home hugging and kissing each other. It's a good department. I was a little bit more concerned about that whole definition. And I would hope that the mayor or some of the other commissioners could really expand on that at the next meeting, because that has me concerned. I don't want to see that there's a cancer inside of our police department that is more so normal than I hate to use the term hazing that goes on. And I use that term very loosely as I say that, but the hazing that goes on inside of a police department, because that is a coping mechanism for those officers.
There are many different ways that people in that occupation deal with it. There's some gallows humor sometimes that other people that don't, see some of the things that they see. That's just a coping mechanism is a good way to put it. We're all individuals, and I think one of the things that I was trying to articulate is that I think our police department as a whole should be about public safety and making sure we have a safe community, and integrity as manifested by trust from the citizens and just the way they go about their business.
Okay.
And I think when I was describing or trying to describe what I saw or felt, I think some people had lost sight of the bigger picture and were more worried. Worried's not the right word, but my mind is kind of NyQuiling on me tonight. It's more self-centered rather than looking at the organization. I think you asked what's being done about it.
Yes.
And I can tell you that Chief Harris has come back with a very hands-on approach. He has met with each of his officers individually and then collectively. In that, he has taken responsibility for the breakdown, personal responsibility for it, and has set forth some guidelines that he expects to be followed if they plan to continue on with the police department. And he's holding himself to those guidelines as well. So my sense of it is, and I'm still slightly associated, though I'm back out in the park, is that they're shorthanded. I don't want to frighten anybody, but occasionally there's just either Larry and I and one other patrolman keeping you safe. But
Don't say that
they're
loud.
shorthanded, and we need to hire some patrolmen. But the collective attitude is pointed in the right direction. I think it's moving in the right direction, and I think the final part of that will be for this investigation to get resolved. And I, for one, think it's gone on far too long, and we've gone down too many different mazes that are really not, maybe we needed to chase it, maybe we didn't. Wasn't my decision, but we've been doing this for 2 months now, and I really think that we can't fully resolve the issues until we get that taken care of.
Okay, thank you.
Hope that answers your question.
Well, absolutely, it does. And I appreciate the candor with it. I really do. I mean, I know it's tough to speak bad about the police department, fire department. Our first responders are what we really need, and they're our most important piece of city government.
I will tell you that I've worked on the reserve and as a park ranger for 5 years. And, you know, I have faith in those people. I mean, I see what they do, and I have participated not in a lot, but some of it, and they are trying to do the right thing. But in any organization, even good people sometimes can get focused on the wrong ball, and if they do, then it kind of gets off track. And I think Chief Harris is working very hard, and Lieutenant Russell, he's pulled Lieutenant Russell back in from the park, and I think those two gentlemen are working very hard. And on behalf of the police officers, I think they are responding in a very positive way. I think they are trying to do everything they can do to restore normalcy, if there is such a thing as normalcy within the police department.
That's not a word that they like to use. And my final question is concerns agenda items, and this one's specifically for Commissioner Crutcher. Commissioner, at the last BOC meeting, you attempted to introduce an agenda item regarding employment of the city manager. There's a lot that went on in that meeting, and you never got to fully explain to us why you had intended to introduce that measure. Could you tell us the reason behind that, the logic? What was your intent with that? I mean, you kind of got slammed in the social media world this past week, and I think you deserve an opportunity to really come forward and put yourself out there so that we can understand what was going on.
Yeah. Are you asking why it was on the agenda? Is that
Why it
the
was on the
question?
agenda, and what was the reason for it being on the agenda?
Yeah. And I appreciate your question, Mr. Dudich. And I'll tell you the events that led up to that being placed on the agenda as best I can. What I won't do tonight, and I don't think it would be beneficial for anybody, is go into specifics about my opinion as to Mr. Hall. He's not here, and in fairness to him, I don't want to do that. But I will tell you the events that led up to it being placed on the agenda. The end of February, I think it may have been the 29th, don't quote me on the date, we had an executive session. The executive session was called and duly announced about a status update as to the investigation with the police department. That was the purpose of the executive session. During the executive session, all 5 board members were present. I know there was a question asked, I think this past weekend, about whether or not the city attorney was present. The city attorney was not present. The city manager was present. Mr. Hall, it became apparent to me that Mr. Hall was very stressed out based on what had transpired over the course of the past couple of months. And sort of off subject, near the end of that executive session, I asked Mr. Hall, just out of curiosity, so that I kind of had an idea of what may be coming down the pike in the future due to what he was feeling at that time, how much longer he intended on being employed as the city manager, how long he saw, staying with the city. That resulted in him responding in a way that I didn't necessarily expect him to respond at that particular time, but he responded that he didn't feel, and I'm summarizing, not quoting Mr. Hall, but he didn't feel or didn't know how much longer he could do what he was doing. That was his response. And as a result of that response, it kind of, I guess, caught me off guard, probably caught some of the other board members off guard. And there was some discussion, no vote taken, no deliberation, but just various members of the BOC commenting about what Mr. Hall had said. And there was discussion about Mr. Hall, if he was going to leave the role as city manager, doing it in a respectful way and with dignity, and not to be, we already had the police investigation going on, not to bring him in here publicly and, sort of put him through it, so to speak, in terms of our feelings about how he was doing as city manager. And just to back up just a bit, if you might recall earlier this year or late last year, Commissioner Vassell had mentioned about doing evaluations as relates to the city manager, because that just simply hadn't been done. And in fact, there was a sheet that was very helpful that Mr. Vassell had handed out, and I had started working on that. And in all candor, when I asked that question, Mr. Hall, I did believe that we needed to change at city manager. That was my opinion, individual opinion, okay? I didn't share that day in that meeting. That was just my opinion that I kept to myself. So after that meeting, I learned sometime after that Mr. Hall had made the decision to resign as city manager and was wanting to move to the codes department. And in fact, during that executive session, Mr. Hall said that codes was his passion. Again, paraphrasing, not quoting him, but it was his passion, his first love, so to speak. He enjoyed codes. Well, some time went by after that meeting. And although I heard that Mr. Hall was resigning, there was really no action taken. Now, you have to understand, there's a lot of stuff still going on. There was an investigation pending. Mr. Hall was in the middle of that. Part of the reason for that executive session at that particular time was the investigation and the time that it was taken for anything to really be accomplished with that. It came to the attention of the board that there was information that just simply had not been provided to those that were conducting the investigation. So there were a lot of things going on. So nothing happened. And part of my reason, not to go into too much detail, for wanting there to be a change at city manager was that there had been some inaction on things in the past when expressly or directly mandated by this board to do something to the city, asking the city manager to do something. There had been inaction. And that's concerning to me, or was concerning to me. So when there was inaction on that particular issue, then I asked that it be put on the agenda. I asked that it be put on the agenda for, one, nothing had been done, although I'd heard that there was going to be a resignation. It hadn't happened yet. Two, Commissioner Vassell had talked about evaluations. I had attempted, again, in all candor, to do those evaluations privately. And ask the city attorney, and even about doing a private meeting to do that. Because I'll be honest, when you're talking about someone's employee, and I'm all for transparency, but it's very difficult to bring a man in here who has given the amount of time, whether we agree with it with each other on every single thing, but to bring him in here and to put him through what I felt like he was going to be put through, I didn't think was fair to Mr. I don't think it'd be fair to anybody, quite frankly. We're elected officials. I mean, that's fine. You have every right to come in here and call us out or on Facebook or publicly about what we do or what we say. But Mr. Hall, I didn't feel like that was the way to really handle it. I mean, that was my opinion. So I learned that we couldn't do that, that would not be proper for us to collectively meet and share our opinions about his performance. And so despite those efforts, I felt like I had no choice but to put it on the agenda. And had that agenda item gone forward, and, you know, he resigned, so it kind of really made it a moot point, and it would have been just an exercise in futility to go through all the reasons that, you know, I felt like we needed a change at city manager. But again, in candor, I felt that way. I have no idea what the other 4 members of this board felt about that. I don't know if that vote would have happened. I don't know what would have happened. But again, at this point, he resigned. I'm ready to move forward. I'm ready to get us a city manager in here, to propel this city into, you know, into a position that's going to make us a great place to live. And you know, I look forward to being here. I think we have a great future ahead of us. And this is a part of putting that into motion. So I hope that
No, it does.
that answers your question.
It does. It answers my question. And for the record, I actually appreciate your restraint at the last meeting with that, particularly because his family was here. And as you said, it's kind of uncomfortable if you're going to excoriate somebody to really do it in front of their family when it's about employment more so than a personal issue. So I do appreciate that restraint, and that's why I asked that question this evening. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone else? Oh, Bob.
Are you wanting us to answer that?
That was rhetorical. My name is Bob Brooks. I live at 7315 Chester Road. And because we don't have everybody here that I may have wanted to speak to, I'll keep this shorter than I would have. I made a list the other day about things I'm angry about relative to the city. So I won't go through the list, but I do want to read the first one because it's been bothering me. And one of the things I'm angry about is treating the citizens as the enemy, as if they're too stupid to understand the way the city works. Now, I've gotten that reading between the lines, rightly or wrongly, my perception. I've seen posts on social media indicating that it's the citizens' fault that we're in such a negative light. Let's think about how we got to where we are right now with this blow up with the police department, or our attention given by TV, newspaper reporting. Mr. Williams made a trip to Nashville to do what he was going to do to meet that prostitute. Didn't have anything to do with Fairview. It was a Metro arrest that just happened to look at his wallet and see a Fairview police identification card. Well, that's what brought all of this attention to the things that we've been talking about lately. That's why a lot of citizens have gotten in an uproar about things. Had that not happened, and I just wonder if it might have been divine intervention to bring light to some of the problems that we've had. But we hear that the city is trying to fix things. I believe that. I really do. I believe that Terry's doing a better job because he's seen some things that needed to be changed. But these kinds of things have been going on for years. This isn't something that just happened 2 months ago that we became aware of. This has been going on before, and the reason behind it, had they not caught him in that sex thing, we'd still be doing things as we always had, because nobody would have made it a priority. So now that we've made the newspaper, I understand why the city leadership's embarrassed. You need to be embarrassed. It's not on the citizens, it's on y'all. Now, I wish the other two were here to hear this. I mean, it's not fair that you're taking 60% of the blame for this. But we have not had the proper oversight in some of our departments, I'll say it that way, for a long time. That's why things were allowed to happen as they did. Alan, you said you realized that some things, well, no, it was Shannon, I'm sorry. You realized some things that the leadership was asked to do just weren't done. That's not on the citizens. You're the supervisor of the city manager, and it goes down from there. So I know some of us are more vocal than others, but I'm offended that some on the board believe that it's these rowdy 8 or 9 citizens that have caused this coup and all this turmoil, and to say that no businesses are going to come to Fairview and nobody is going to run for an office is ludicrous. So all of that, take with the fact that I am angry about it, but as Donna said, as you mentioned, we need it to be a team effort. It's not city government versus the citizens. If we don't do it together, we lose. But don't make the citizens the enemy. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Name is Ron Rowe, 7232 McCormick Lane, Fairview. I didn't have a prepared statement, but when it was brought up about the comprehensive land use plan and that discussion, I just wanted to throw some thought out there. As you all know, I've helped out Mr. Hall in the codes department, and I've encouraged the Planning Commission members to get training. It's very important that our Planning Commission, no matter who they are or what trade they make a living from, they need to understand how to process developers, how to process these, and to get a good grip on the overall picture. It starts from the Board of Commissioners on what your vision of what the city is too, in conjunction with the citizens. I think that's lacking right now. And we have no money to train the Plan Commission. The people that have gone to seminars have paid it out of their own pocket. I know I've attended seminars, like Greenway and Trail Seminar, the American Planning Association Tennessee chapter. It's so important in the future here to have training, to get the basis, the foundation down. So when these things come across, that the Plan Commission has all the tools to make a decision. That comes from having a staff that presents all of the data to the Planning Commission. And then the Planning Commission reviews the data, the recommendations from staff. We're shorthanded right now. We need to, in the future, the Board of Commissioners needs to allocate money towards amending that comprehensive plan. And by the way, I don't think it needs a whole lot, because if you look at what was visioned in 2000 and what we're doing now, it's not that far off. What happened is the Board of Commissioners decided to change some things or had an influence over changing things over the years. If we would have followed it, I think it would have been more on track. But because of the sewer situation, it changes how development is going to take place here. So again, I encourage, when you do your budget, to put money in there for either consultant planner. We need the professional viewpoint on this. We can't rely on citizen experience. I have 7 or 8 years of plan commission and zoning but that doesn't make me an expert at it. I just know that I've had the experience and I've had some training on it. So we need professional guidance. It was brought up about the zoning on 100, changing it from residential to commercial. My comment on that was there was no real discussion about it from a good planning practices. That property is residential in the back of that lot, residential in the front. So you want to make that commercial. There's no transition. Good planning practices, you would transition, say, from single-family homes to multifamily and then to commercial. And there was no discussion on all of the uses in that commercial. Is it compatible being next to a school? So again, education, not only on Plan Commission, but you folks too. So I think I've said enough. So thanks for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else? I've just got any comments from the board? Alan?
Nothing else. Thank you.
I've just got a couple of things nothing really that big, but the comments earlier about the police department. I've been with the sheriff's department 21 years, this coming July. I plan on retiring. And in Williamson County Sheriff's Department, they have hired almost 1,000 people in that sheriff's department in the last 21 years, from the time I started till now. It has gotten to the point in that occupation that it's very difficult to hire people that want to do that job. And the fire department's just about the same way, except they're not held up to as much public scrutiny as the police department is. And I'll guarantee you it's a culture. It has to be a culture. Sadly enough, most of the friends that police officers have are within the department. They're not out somewhere else in the community. This is what you rely on because they understand. My wife, I have 2 boys that were in law enforcement, and they used to hate it when we get together because that's all we talk about. And but it's to the point now where you don't want to get out and pump your gas in your uniform because you get shot. It is. My last recollection on it is that occupation had the highest rate of divorce, suicide, spousal suicide of any other occupation. So it's a difficult job to do and do well. I'm proud of the ones we've got. I'm proud to work for the sheriff's department. Jeff Long with the county, Terry Harris with the city has done a fantastic job. I know several times there in the last year we were rated the 2nd or 3rd safest city in the state of Tennessee. There's a lot of cities in the state of Tennessee, and I'm very proud of that. Do we have problems? Yep, we do. Are we working on them? Yes, we are. But when you see one of them, I tell them, thank you for your service, like I do somebody that was in the service. Thank you for your service. Appreciate it. Because they put their lives on the line every day, so does the fire department. And so just keep that in mind next time you see one. That's all I've got. If there's nothing else, no adjourn. Thank you for your time.